Hey everyone, how you doing today? We have the lovely Dana from Hemline back with us. How you doing, Dana?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. So one of the things that we haven't talked about, but we should, right? We've talked about tenant selection and fair housing and all these other things, which is around getting a good tenant in. I think we should step back and realize that most of the time we should be thinking about lease renewals and how we keep good tenants and when do we do rent increases and when do we send notices that a renewal is coming up, and just that whole process of lease renewal, I don't think is something we've covered. So let's talk about that. What do you think?
Yeah. I really, if you look at the apartment complexes, they have an incredible process down. I'm talking about the large apartment complexes. They give something called optionality with lease renewals. And I think that is really incredibly important because don't forget, this is your customer.
Mhm.
The more options you give to a customer, the more likely they are to select you,
Yeah.
right? It's like if you only gave them size medium shirt and they're like, no, I'm a large, that's not going to work. So I think the same thing with lease renewals, in the sense that you really want to give them optionality so that they can pick and choose. Apartments will have way more optionality. There'll be like a 3-month lease at this, a 6-month lease at this, a 9-month lease at this rate. And sometimes a shorter lease will actually be cheaper if they want a summer turnover based on their own demand. They've got a whole algorithm.
Yeah.
But simplifying it for the small mom and pops, I think having optionality in your lease renewal is something small mom and pops don't do. And then they get kind of reactive because they realize their tenant's going to move out. And then suddenly they're like, oh, wait, just kidding. I'm going to change the price. I'll drop it again by like 200. It's like, wait a second. You just told them that other price. Now you're telling them this price. So
You've actually trained them. You've trained them to threaten to move. That's what you've done. You've trained them. It's crazy.
Exactly. And then you don't raise the rent at all. So I think it's really important to give options and also look at, so you start by looking at market rates and you look at this, at least 60 days, but you can start 90 days, 120 days beforehand of what do we expect the market rates to be, right? And this is all assuming you have a good tenant, a good customer, right?
Correct. Assume, yeah.
You want to keep, which is majority of the time. Let's hope you've objectively screened.
Yeah.
And then what you want to do is look at, okay, I always want to give 2 options because if I only give one and I say, Michael, I'm raising the rent, it's another year-long lease you need to sign, and I'm raising it by 2%. Michael's going to be like, what? You're raising my rent? I've been such a great tenant. But the second that you give 2 options of, okay, you could do a month-to-month lease and it's going to be raised by, say 4%, or you could do a annual lease that's raised at maybe 1 or 2%. And you give that optionality, which is good for you because you want them to have a longer lease. You don't want a lot of turnover as a small mom and pop. Suddenly, the annual lease looks like a great deal. It's like, oh, okay, it's only 1 to 2% compared to the 4%. I'm going to lock myself into another year with Dana, and this is great. We're going to have a great relationship. So I think optionality is really important, and I typically don't see that. I see now there's certain cases where you wouldn't want that optionality, and I won't go over all those details, but in most cases you do, and you want to work with your customer and make sure your customer, the tenant, feels like I also have a little bit of control and I get what I pay for. I can basically choose. Do I want to go month to month and be more flexible at a higher rate? Do I want to go annual and lock myself in for another year, but get a better rate? And it's really important to look at the market rates because that's what the tenant's doing. And people always ask, is there like an algorithm and, all this data? It's like, no, it's very simple. Do exactly what your customer would do. Go online, search for rental properties and say, okay, in this area, because if they like the area and stuff like that, they'll probably want to stay. In this area for a place like mine, what are they renting for? If the tenant were going to move and they wanted to move into a place similar, what could they get? And how do I incentivize them to stay? That is really important. And sometimes you want to have those conversations, right? I recommend having a conversation with them before sending out the lease renewal of here's your lease renewal, having a Yeah, have a conversation. You don't want to send out the lease renewal and backtrack and change the rates. It is really important to have that communication with them, and just let them know, here's our thoughts. Here's exactly what we're thinking. It really benefits you. Everything's about them. Remember, they're your customer. Everything's about them.
Mhm.
But I think optionality is super important in that lease renewal
Yeah.
process.
It's funny you bring this up. There's another expert I have on the channel, Dion. He has a YouTube channel called Dion Talk. He's really big on bigger pockets, and he has this thing he calls the binder strategy, which is essentially what you're talking about, right? It's optionality, and what he talks about with his binder strategy,
Mm.
he's 100% done. He actually gets the tenant to agree to higher lease and longer term because he gives them all the data, right? Here you are. He actually creates a physical binder. Here's yours. Here's where you're at. Here's like other investments. You like the area. Here's some choices. So I like the fact that my experts are kind of tying it together. So pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that. I haven't heard of the binder approach, but I really like that. I like the data to back it up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just go on my channel, type in binder strategy. I'm sure it'll come up. So it'll be there. So any
Cool.
closing thoughts on this, Dana? This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think if you do have a lease renewal coming up this year, the one thing I would say with COVID, things are changing a lot. So if you look back and you're looking at data, don't do like a 12-month look back. Really do a 3-month look back. If you're on something like Rentometer that does
Yeah, that's a good
look
point.
backs, just make sure that things have changed, right, with COVID significantly from 12 months ago. So make sure you're looking at the right data and then what's on market today.
Yeah, I'll just close with, if you're in single family homes, which most mom and pop landlords are, you have pricing power like you have never had before in most of the country. We're seeing double digit raises with single family homes in my market. So it's pretty crazy. So Dana, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much.